Hello， 大家好，我是 Wendy。今天我们请到了 Chainlink CEO Sergey. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name's Sergey Nazarov. I'm one of the people building Chainlink, which is a secure blockchain middleware that connects contracts to all the events out in the real world.
So most of your work experience are related to smart contract. Why are you interested in smart contracts?
I think there's a very significant impact that smart contracts are going to have on the way all digital agreements function. Now, I think the important thing is that a lot of society exists and functions correctly because contracts can exist. And every time that you see an improvement in how people are able to form agreement, you see a lot of economic activity that gets generated. A lot of new enterprises, even inventions, goods, services, basically prosperity. Like even some of the first contracts where people could have letters of credit so they could trade trade across long distances. Those were contracts that allowed people to trade. It allowed people to go from one place to another, to bring goods and ideas between each other. And even the development of ideas is based on the ability of contracts to enable certain types of economic activity. What I see right now, smart contracts are the first form of digital agreement that's genuinely highly reliable. And what that means is that they can define relationships between people as an impartial third party. So all the digital agreements that exist today, they're in the sense in which they're under somebody's control is that they can't impartially evaluate and correctly resolve basically contracts. Because if somebody wanted to stop them and to make the contract go in their favor, they could. So I think there's two very important dynamics. One important dynamic, and it actually differs greatly between developed markets and emerging markets. Developed markets, generally speaking, already have digital agreement in some form. And that digital agreement has certain failure scenarios, and then it also has certain key limitations that create things like systemic risk. So if you look at something like, I'll give you an example. If you look at something like the 2008 financial crisis, basically, that was an issue of transparency about the status of a contract. Nobody could really understand who owned what, how many mortgages does Joe have. And then you take a bunch of Joes and you slap them together, and that creates even more obscurity, more obfuscation, and it enables a certain systemic risk and a certain set of incentivized or not incentivized kind of outcomes that leads to a societal problem, like a huge financial crisis. And like, for example, if you had smart contracts in the year 2005, 6, 7, if somebody were to come in and get a mortgage, there would be a single smart contract, there's the Joe's smart contract, and it would be continually updated with all the mortgages that he has, and it would be continually updated with his, his credit score, it would be updated with all the information that anybody needs to know, and then because the record would be trustworthy, it could move between institutions. So having an impartial kind of third-party system that is actually reliable would have enabled people to form the type of records and information sharing that even if it didn't stop this thing, it would have definitely softened it. Nobody would have invested massive amounts of people's pensions into a collection of contracts where some guy who has no income owns 5 houses. Right? So the problem was that you have digital state. The digital state is hugely deficient, and those deficiencies create market inefficiencies that some few people exploit, where the rest of society suffers massively. Right? So this is the dynamic in developed markets that smart contracts, as a highly reliable third party, can solve. in emerging markets, and I think what's going to happen is a lot of this technology is going to get polished in more developed markets where this is improving on the digital state they have and solving their different category of kind of optimization type problems. The second category, this is the category that gets me extremely excited about smart contracts and always has, is the effect that they'll have on emerging markets. So in emerging markets, there's entire categories of contracts that simply can't exist. These contracts are unable to exist because the local legal system cannot allow them to function. One common example is crop insurance. So there are places in the world where people desperately need something like crop insurance because they're on the economic edge of what they can do. They're at the mercy of weather events. And this is actually, these types of situations are why a lot of financial products were actually created, was to help business owners hedge risk. But there's entire parts of the world where the local legal system can't allow people to have this type of contract because nobody's going to start an insurance company, nobody's going to trust an insurance company that's enforced by these laws because there's just no impartial third-party way to form this relationship between the farmer and the insurance company and the capital reserves and all these types of relationships. So I think the most massive impact that all of this will have in years over the next years is the ability for a parallel technically enforced legal system to enable contracts to work in places where they're extremely necessary. Like one of the things that got me extremely excited about the whole space when I got into it was there were these startups that they would take feature phones, like the phones, not the smartphones, but like the flip phones, and they would allow people to send Bitcoin on feature phones in countries where they just got these phones. So these places didn't have bank accounts. It's like a couple 100-person village. They don't have a bank. They don't have bank accounts. They don't have a way to do savings. They don't have a way to send money across the mountains to their cousin who lives in the other village. And the thing that was amazing to me was that somebody with a feature phone could own some kind of digital asset that they could send across the mountains to their, to some family member instead of taking like a half-a-day walk or something. And the other amazing thing was that they could set up something called multi-signature. So they could create an escrow, which is a very basic contract. But these people they now no longer needed some kind of legal system to give them escrow. They could just take out their feature phones and they could set up a few, relationships between them and the asset. And they would say, for this asset to be paid, we need 3 people to say yes. And to me, this idea was like one of the most eye-opening ideas. Was that there's this huge failure in many categories of contracts and many categories of how contractual systems work, both in developed markets, but even more so in emerging markets. And the ability for people to transact and for people to have insurance and for people to have savings and not having to wait for some deficient local process to give that to them, that technology could give that to them in a guaranteed, highly reliable manner. That's amazing. That's an absolutely kind of world-changing set of events. If technology can give people like that, can give everybody a reliable way to transact and interact with banks and each other and insurance and all these things, and to do it in a way that if a bunch of people do it, it doesn't suddenly crash the global economy. Like both of those things, to me, are absolutely amazing to have, in my opinion. I think once we have it, we're going to look back and we're going to be like, why, how could we not, how could this work any other way?
What is the problem that Chainlink trying to solve?
Sure. So I think to really understand the problem, you need to look at what smart contracts can do today and what they can't do today. So, or what they can do without Chainlink and what they can't do without Chainlink or an Oracle. Generally speaking, what smart contracts can do out of the box is they can generate data about tokens, and they can move that data about tokens, and that feature is built in because it's related to mining. So it's something that every blockchain network has to have because it's related to kind of generating a relationship with the miners and the people who secure the network. And so that's why this capability was an initial built-in feature to every network. And so what people have done is they've taken this capability that was initially made for incentivizing miners, and they've expanded it to do other types of tokens, and that's kind of as far as the space has come. So the reason everybody's so focused on tokens, it's not because this is the only thing that smart contracts can do. It's because it's all you can do with them right now. The reality is that smart contracts can do a lot more, but in order for them to do a lot more, they need to be written about events. They need to be written about market events, like market price changes for financial products. They need to be written about weather events for insurance for farmers and crops. They need to be written about shipping and the location of goods for trade finance and all these types of global shipping types of contracts. Generally speaking, the real problem that we solve and that we think is holding this space back is the inability for a smart contract to get events data, and the inability for a smart contract to generate an external event. So the ability for a contract to know that the weather has changed and therefore it should pay the insurance policy, or that the market price has changed, or that the goods have arrived. All of that can't happen at the base layer, at the blockchain layer, because it creates a security issue. If you make one of the miners, one of the people that secures the block, responsible for getting that data, then they control the contract. And if you get all the miners to do it, it introduces a huge security risk into the entire miner kind of set, right? So it puts the whole base layer at risk. Now, all of these contracts, smart contracts in general, are unique in that they provide an extremely high level of reliability. And this extremely high level of reliability is what the base layer guarantees by having this more limited capacity. Now, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to expand what a contract can do, and therefore we're expanding what it's defined as, while maintaining reliability. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the contract to interact with all these events. But in the process of doing that, we're expanding what we define a contract as. So now we don't just define it as something that generates and moves tokens, because all of that data and logic is in the network. We're now defining a contract, we're redefining what a contract is from moving tokens to something that can have state changes, can define logic of state changes about events. And so this relationship between the logic of state changes and events creates a new technology that needs to guarantee the event. And guaranteeing the event is really what we work on. So we focus on making it so that the event that triggers a contract is as reliable as the contract, and the event the contract generates is as reliable as it can be. And if you can have reliability for this new type of contract that guarantees that the contract will change its state, guarantees you to a very high degree that the contract will correctly know what happened, and guarantees you that the contract will be able to correctly effect an event or a payment or whatever it needs to do out in the real world, and you're able to maintain all of those new capabilities at a high level of security, then you've successfully expanded what a smart contract is. And that expansion of a smart contract is really the goal that we hope to see. We're on the path to making happen, and we're hoping to happen even quicker by creating this infrastructure that enables other people to build contracts that use and generate events. So this is really the goal and the body of work that Chainlink is involved in.
So how does Chainlink provide a secure oracle?
The goal for us is to create the most secure oracle and then allow people to select however much security they want to pay for. So creating the most secure oracle, in our opinion, requires the application of a defense in depth security strategy, which means that you apply multiple security approaches. And I'm just going to quickly go through some of the main ones. So at the foundational level, we take the security approach of our space, which is extreme redundancy, decentralization, where you have multiple independent node operators coming to consensus about a computation. In blockchains, they come to consensus about computations related to transactions and about the computation of, this token moved there and now the ownership is with that private key or that, address or whatever it is, right? Generally speaking, the type of computation that Chainlink is focused on is validating external data feeds, coming to consensus among node operators about what actually happened against the various data feeds that a user selects as authoritative, and then achieving a level of reliability for that event that is at a high enough level to trigger a contract of a certain value. And probably the degree of surety that you want about the event increases with the value of the contract. Now, that might mean that you want more decentralization as more value is in the contract. So for a contract of $1,000, you might want 3 oracles. For a contract of $1 million, you might want much more. And then so on and so on, right? So at the base level, it's decentralization. The second approach that we're big believers in is what we call provable security. So provable security focuses on a data-driven view of security, where you have a lot of information that's difficult to game, that's immutable, and that proves a few key points about a contract owners, and in this case, an oracle's security. So this would be things like the service agreement that I formed with the oracle clearly defines what they're going to do for me. I know that this oracle has serviced 7 other contracts. 3 of them are owned by banks, 4 of them are owned by insurance companies, and I've known it successfully serviced all of those contracts with a 0 error rate. I know that this oracle is going to give me, X amount of dollars in stake to guarantee that I'm going to get the data. I know that this oracle is run by, this company. I know that it's a specific individual entity that's running this oracle, that isn't, that your oracle network isn't run by one person. That's, that level of Sybil resistance we think is going to be generally important. And then there's more, on top of this provable security model, there's more and more and more and more layers of clarity about what guarantees can an oracle give you. One of those guarantees could be trusted execution environments. Trusted execution environments are these hardened kind of computing environments, usually called enclaves, that guarantee a very high level of security and reliability, so the node operator can't even know what the computation is. Generally speaking, what we do is we layer on this high level of decentralization that people can manage based on the budget they have, this ability to provably show that the oracles you have are reasonably secure and that a certain collection of them will get you a certain level of security, and then that you can variably select the amount of other features like trusted execution environments, the stake they give you, and you should be able to control that and have a cost that's relative to the value secured by those oracles.
So what are your plans to expand Chainlink?
So at the moment we've been live on mainnet for a number of months. I think it's pretty much going in the right direction. We have at this moment what I would consider the most decentralized, most Sybil resistant Oracle network for something like on-chain price data, where we put something like the ETH USD price from 15 oracles, which have all undergone a security review interview, a week of on-chain testing, a week of off-chain testing, and a security review process where we learn things like what infrastructure they run. Do they run their own Ethereum node? Do they run Infura? Like what are different risks that we have with their infrastructure? I think what we're going to continue to do is we're going to continue to expand the very high quality node operator set that we have. I think we're going to expand the types and amount of computations they can do. Right now we have over 260 distinct jobs or functions or computations that types like encapsulated pieces of code that Oracle can run. And these jobs can be things like retrieving data and doing computations on them, and they limit what an Oracle does to the point where it is secure, and to the point where a user can define, I want 7 oracles to do this very specific job for me. We want to expand the amount of secure jobs that exist. That means expanding the amount of the data sources and payment resources integrated into Chainlink, which means that more adapters are getting built. So generally speaking, we want to expand the security of the highest quality node network. We want to increase the amount of specific computations those nodes can do. We want to increase the amount of integrations that people have when they want to use Chainlink, and we want to greatly expand. We also want to greatly expand the usefulness that people get out of this. One of the things that we're doing there is we're launching 7 new reference data networks. What that means is those 15 oracles, which are going to go to 21 oracles, feeding from 7 or 8 data sources, are going to be able to provide greater and greater collections of reference data. And that reference data is something that a user could utilize without even forming a relationship with our system. It's kind of just a community resource that we're putting out there because we think it's very important for there to be good reference data that decentralized finance projects can quickly use and rely on, and that there needs to be an impartial, non-competitive, high-quality, open source kind of manner of generating this shared reference data resource that a lot of these projects can be built on. And we already have 1 very good network. We're expanding to 7 more, and then from there we'll probably expand to more. Beyond that, we're also heavily growing our team. We're kind of in a very lucky position where we have the ability to hire many great people, and we're continuing to do that. We've just passed 25 people. We're growing our team internationally, also here in China and a few other regions, both for development and community building. I think sometime soon you'll see a series of meetups from us about how to build great smart contracts. One of the key teams that we're also expanding is the integrations team. This is the team that goes out and makes sure that there's a lot of new data providers coming in, payments resources being put on Chainlink, and actually working with specific dApp developers and decentralized finance, decentralized insurance projects, where if they have an issue that they want a specific data source, they can come to us and we can have an entire team that's dedicated to solving this problem for them in a quick, secure, and very provable manner where they can show to their users that they are able to guarantee that their decentralized application is secure end to end. So another big kind of hope and plan for the future is that we would be a place where dApp developers could come and get their Oracle's problems solved for them because the thing that really excites us as a team is enabling them to build something great. So I think one of the big next steps is continuing to grow the team with great people, and specifically the integrations team that's going to work very closely with all kinds of dApps to solve their Oracle problem in a very kind of high-touch focused manner. And likewise, if there's people building great decentralized applications and they need their Oracle problem solved, I really do encourage them to come to us and ask us to see how we could help them. Because chances are that we have data providers, payments providers, specific functions built. We have a large and growing marketplace of all these resources that we can configure for them in probably a matter of hours, maybe a number of days, in a way that's more secure, more provably secure to their user, and something that saves them probably weeks. So I think making a highly secure Oracle, making it easily consumable, providing good reference data to the DeFi space to get it off the ground even faster, and having a good service around making integrations work.
So what do you think are the sectors and types of contracts that will drive blockchain adoption quickest?
I think generally speaking, the sectors that I've seen drive the most adoption are the decentralized finance sector, which is basically the creation of traditional financial products on chain. Decentralized insurance is next, and then fraud-proof gaming after that. I think all of these sectors, I know all of these sectors need oracles. They all need very different types of oracles. The decentralized finance folks need oracles that provide them with reliable market data. The decentralized insurance folks need integration team that'll get them integrated with all the relevant inputs and outputs they need. And the fraud-proof gaming folks need randomness, and they need a few set of events that they want to build their games around. So generally speaking, I think I think those three categories: decentralized finance, decentralized insurance, fraud-proof gaming, are the ones that are really going to be taking off.
So how does Chainlink relate to these sectors and types of contracts you mentioned?
Yeah, so our focus is on enabling great teams in all of these categories, and other categories as well that maybe we just haven't seen emerge yet. So I think on the decentralized finance part of this, that's where a lot of the reference data contracts that we're going to be making, starting with these new 7 that we're releasing, and then many more. I think that is going to really jumpstart what people can build, because they're suddenly going to have a very easy to use on-chain resource that they simply need to read from, which is the lowest cost, most efficient way for them to get that data. And I think there's going to be so many DeFi projects that need the same data, that us kind of taking on the costs and the effort for making a high quality on-chain resource is something that it doesn't have like immediate huge gains for us, but I think what it'll do is it'll create that piece of infrastructure that decentralized finance folks really need to build. And I think my genuine hope is that it'll greatly accelerate what they can build, and that we'll have a process for getting the most valuable pieces of reference data on chain as more and more people need it, right? So making a very high quality on-chain resource that initially is only used by the small amount of DeFi projects out there now, but eventually enables a lot more of those projects to get built, because the Oracle problem is essentially solved for them. Because what they need is market data. The market data is on chain. They get it. They build what they need to build. Decentralized insurance, generally speaking, has a lot of hand-holding. It has a lot of integration-related work. That's where our growing team of integration engineers, product managers, all those types of folks that are going to be working on specific integrations with people building all kinds of geolocation-related things, weather-located things, all kinds of data that's related to insurance. There's going to be a lot of work around making sure that the insurance contract has all the inputs that it needs and is able to generate all the payments and all the other outputs that it needs in a way that doesn't put a burden on the developers. So I think we're gonna make a substantial impact on decentralized insurance, which is taking longer than decentralized finance, but I think that's just because the complexity there is larger. And then fraud-proof gaming. Fraud-proof gaming breaks out into a few categories. One of the main categories is a highly, highly reliable, provable source of randomness. And that randomness is something that we're working on and that we're in the, we have plans to release sometime soon so that the blockchain kind of gaming community can have a source of randomness that they could show their user a contract and they could show their user a piece of on-chain data, and both of those resources would be equally reliable. And because generally speaking, fraud-proof gaming and a lot of the digital non-fungible token stuff, I think also makes a lot of sense. And we're excited to enable all of that because I think it is a better form of gaming when you can actually rely on the service you're using, and it is a better source of gaming when all the effort you put into something is something that you own.
Yeah. So last question.
Uh-huh.
What do you think about China?
I think to a certain degree, a place is defined by the people that inhabit that place and their culture and their habits and their values. And so I think what I've always thought about China and Chinese people is that they're extremely hardworking. They have an extremely high value for education, which I completely agree with myself personally. They have a lot of respect for their elders, which I completely understand and agree with once again. I think there's also a certain premium that people place on politeness a lot of the time. So my experience with China, with Chinese people, both in China and outside of China, has always been very positive. I think the reason China is doing so well and will continue to do well is because of these, strong cultural kind of qualities that all Chinese people have. So to me, it makes sense. I think it makes sense that China is going to be a huge market globally and in the crypto world as well. I'm happy to see that there's more adoption of things in China. I understand that it's very heavily related to regulation and all those types of things, but I think I'm also impressed by how quickly things can get figured out in China. Basically, it seems like things don't happen for a while, and then in 2 weeks, everything gets figured out. And I think that shows a capacity to figure things out very quickly when you need to. So I think in that sense, it's also good.
Is this your first time to China, or you learned a lot from the internet?
No, I've been to China a few times. I think this is my third or my fourth time.
Okay.
I've been to China a few times. I've read some stuff from Confucius. I've looked at the Tao. I have some small sense of what some of the ideas behind Chinese culture are, and all of the ideas that I've seen that seem to be behind Chinese culture at a fundamental level, they seem very sound. So that's just how I look at it. I try to understand what the principle is behind something, and I think a lot of the principles behind China and Chinese culture and all those things, they seem very solid to me. It seems like it's on very solid, thoughtful ground.
今天我们的采访就到这里. Thank you for watching. Bye.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Nice chatting with you, and 谢谢.